The most dangerous request in ancient inheritance law was not murder. It was something quieter, and in its own way more devastating still. Before the parable arrives, the Gospel of Luke sets a scene that matters for how the story lands. Crowds draw near, including people labeled tax collectors and sinners, while Pharisees and scribes mutter about who deserves company and who does not. Jesus responds not with a courtroom speech, but with 3 stories about losing and finding. The first is a sheep, the second is a coin. The third is a household torn open by money and memory. A shepherd's joy over 1 sheep and a woman's joy over 1 coin are not rhetorical filler. They are drumbeats. By the time the parable reaches the household, the listener has already been trained to listen for the word found. The word is repeated until it becomes a pulse. Lost, found, dead, alive. The language stacks opposites into one breath, as if the story wants you to feel how disorienting mercy can be when it refuses to track neatly with what people think others deserve. The narrative introduces a man who has 2 sons. That simple fact already loads the stage. Inheritance is not an abstract idea in this setting. It is land, animals, the visible proof of lineage, the material argument that your ancestors endured so you could stand where you stand. To ask for a share while the father lives is to treat the future like a debt you insist on collecting early. A younger son walks up to his father and asks for his share of the estate now. In the world that produced this story, that sentence is not polite impatience. It is a public severing of loyalty, a way of saying the father might as well be dead, because the son wants the life split open early and paid out while the old man still breathes. Scholars who study 1st century Jewish family law and Mediterranean honor culture note how such a demand would have stunned listeners. The shame would not stay private. It would ripple through kin, neighbors, and the wider community like a stone dropped into still water. Many listeners would have braced for refusal, for a curse, for a public lesson about duty. The story does not linger on courtroom contracts. It trusts the listener to feel the collapse. Yet the text is careful where it could have been vague. It tells you about famine, hire, hunger, and return. It tells you about clothing placed on skin, meat prepared for many guests, music lifting into the night air. Each detail drags the abstract idea of forgiveness down into bodies that sweat, stomachs that cramp, and ears that hear celebration without being invited. But that was not the real turning point. The father grants the request. The estate divides. The younger son leaves. He travels to what the text calls a distant country, a phrase that sounds almost neutral until you feel the weight of distance in an age when distance meant danger, unfamiliar gods, and the slow erasure of your name back home. There he squanders the property in reckless living. The Greek wording behind the tradition suggests wasteful, foolish expenditure, the kind that burns through money the way fire eats dry grass. Every coin becomes a witness against him later. And then something unexpected happened. A severe famine strikes that region. The prodigal, who had been spending as if tomorrow would never ask for receipts, suddenly needs tomorrow to feed him. He hires himself out to a citizen of that place. The work assigned to him is degrading in the narrative's economy of symbols, swine herding. For a Jewish audience hearing this story within its cultural frame, pigs were unclean animals. The detail is not decorative cruelty from a modern checklist. It is narrative pressure. The son who demanded his father be treated as if he were already gone has now placed himself among what his community would have considered the lowest, most polluted labor. He is hungry enough to crave the pods fed to the pigs. No one gives him anything. The road back is not described street by street. The parable skips the travelogue and saves its breath for what happens when 2 people see each other again. Still, you can feel the weight of miles in the phrase, "He arose and came to his father." Movement is choice. Return is risk. The younger son is not carried home by rumor. He walks into the consequences of his own words at the time. No one realized how far humiliation would travel inside him. He comes to himself. The parable puts the next move in his mouth as cold arithmetic. My father's hired servants have bread enough to spare, and I am dying here with hunger. He rehearses a speech. He will go to his father. He will say he has sinned against heaven and before his father. He will say he is no longer worthy to be called a son. He will ask only to be hired as one of the laborers. What came next was even more significant than the famine. He rises. He goes to his father, but the story refuses to let the return be slow and dignified. While he is still far off, his father sees him. The father is moved with compassion. He runs. In a patriarchal culture where running could imply a loss of dignity, the father's sprint is not sentimentality tacked onto the tail. It is a deliberate reversal of shame. The one who was wronged races toward the one who wronged him. The father embraces him and kisses him. The son begins his prepared confession. He does not get to finish it as a bargaining script. The father interrupts the machinery of groveling and tells the servants to bring the best robe, to put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. The fattened calf will be killed. There will be a feast because this son of his was dead and is alive again, was lost and is found. Readers across centuries have heard those objects as more than costume. A ring and a robe can signal restored standing in a household. A public reversal of the son's self-imposed exile. The feast is not private consolation. It is announcement. The village would hear it in the slaughter and the music. What happened next changed everything for the older brother. Even though he had not left the farm, the party begins. But that was not the end. The older son is in the field. As he comes near the house, he hears music and dancing. A servant explains, "Your brother has returned, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." The older brother refuses to go in. His father comes out and pleads with him. The father does not shout across the courtyard. He goes out as if the older son's refusal to enter deserves the same stubborn dignity the father showed in running toward the younger. At the time, no one could have guessed which refusal would hurt more, leaving home or refusing to come in. The older son's reply is a litany of stored resentment. "Look, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him." Notice the language fracture. He does not say my brother. He says this son of yours as if the tie can be handed back across the table like a bill. The father answers gently and firmly, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." It was fitting to celebrate and be glad. For this your brother was dead and is alive, he was lost and is found. The parable ends there, on that sentence, without a tidy sequel. The Gospel of Luke presents this story as part of a chapter where two other parables also speak of losing and finding, a sheep and a coin. Biblical scholars often read the three as a single rhetorical movement, each repetition tightening the emotional screw. The prodigal narrative is the longest and the most human in its interior detail, and it is commonly situated within the broader scholarly conversation about Luke's composition in the 1st century of the Common Era. The precise dating remains debated among historians of early Christianity. Some interpreters emphasize the father's welcome. Others emphasize the older brother's protest as the story's true cliffhanger. The text itself does not resolve whether the older son ever steps through the doorway. It leaves the feast ringing on one side of the threshold and resentment cooling on the other. What the text preserves is not a court transcript from a named village in a named year. It preserves a story told for listeners whose lives were entangled with debt, honor, family obligation, and the fragile hope that a relationship could survive what reason called finished. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most enduring stories, like the video and subscribe for more weekly breakdowns. The Prodigal Son teaches us that no journey is too long for grace to reach. We are never defined by our past, but by the love that welcomes us home.